Welcome back to Gaming with Spoons and the launch of my retrospective review series. Today, we're going to be taking a look at the very first Ys game, and let me just say that this game has aged significantly well, considering the age that it is. Now, the version we are playing is the Ys Chronicles version that is on Steam, so this is the one that has Ys I and Ys II, both combined in there. Though this is going to kind of be a two-part review as the stories of Ys I and Ys II kind of combine together to tell one major narrative, this review is going to solely focus on the first game. With that being said, let's talk about Ys and its story actually, because Ys is an interesting case. Ys was kind of one of the games that propelled narratives in video games to what they are today, and you can definitely feel the influence that this game had. While I'm not going to say that the story has aged the best, I can definitely see back then why the story was such a big deal. It was really one of the first innovators to be able to tell an expansive story within the world of a video game. We take the role of Adol Christian as he washes up on shore after making a trip through the storm wall, and is found on the shore by a young man named Slav, who takes him to the inn where the doctor tends to his wounds. This is where he wakes up, and we really don't know what he was doing there other than he was caught in a storm that kind of crash landed his ship where he was, and Adol's pretty much whisked away into saving the world. After meeting up with a fortune teller, he is tasked with finding the 6 books of Ys, and that's kind of where the story goes. There are a few surprises and plot details that I'm not going to get into, because I feel like if you're going to play this game, this is something that you're going to want to experience yourself. But considering how dated the game feels in its story, it definitely still kept my interest, which is something I think is pretty noteworthy to say for a game that is of that age. Now let's talk a little bit about its battle system and its gameplay mechanics, because Ys really has quite a bit different battle system than what we're typically used to. So Ys uses what's called the bump system. Basically, you bump into your enemies to do attacks. Now this was kind of difficult to get the grasp on, because I definitely think most gamers in this day and age are really used to kind of actionized battle systems. Even a lot of the later Ys games use a more actionized battle system. But for those of you who are unfamiliar with what the bump system is, the bump system is where you bump into your enemies. Now you don't want to hit your enemies straight on, as that can cause you to take damage, and we want to avoid that. So you either want to hit your enemies from behind or go off more towards the side. So kind of running straight into them towards the side rather than versus like head on where you two are facing each other. It's kind of difficult to really get in the nitty-gritty and explain, but it is something that I definitely struggled with for the good 4 or 5 minutes until I really got the hang of it. And once you get the hang of it, I think the battle system becomes very rewarding, and it does well to accomplish its goal and give you what is one of the most early versions of an action RPG. Now, another thing that Ys does that I've found really interesting, and I wish I could actually upload some of the footage from the final dungeon, because the final dungeon is where you do a lot of your puzzle solving. But for the sake of not really wanting to spoil the final dungeon for anybody, I opted not to show any gameplay footage of the final dungeon. But in each dungeon, you have different puzzles that you may end up having to solve. You have different items that you're going to kind of need to use to be able to progress through the dungeon. One of the instances is a mask that you will put on that actually does reveal certain specific hidden passages inside of the wall. The one drawback to having this mask equipped is it kind of voids of all color, so you can't actually see your enemies, so this is something that you're going to want to use sparingly. One thing with Ys that I truly enjoyed, and anybody planning on picking up the PC versions or the PSP version, I highly recommend going in and changing this to the PC Engine TurboGrafx soundtrack, because the arrangement, I just flat out found that it sucked. Once I turned it onto the PC Engine graphics music, I was blown away by the sheer awesomeness of its soundtrack. You guys know how picky I can be with video game soundtracks, and I would definitely consider this to be one of my favorite video game soundtracks of all time. Yes, Ys's music is that great, and I highly recommend using the original track on the PC Engine the way that it was intentionally meant to be played. If I had to pick one thing to nitpick at, I think it would be its characters. Its characters definitely seem a little bit bland, but considering that this was one of the first games to really try this method of storytelling, I definitely think that this is something that can be easily overlooked. If you are looking to get into the Ys franchise and you're wanting to start from the beginning, this is definitely a game I can recommend. Though I think some gamers are going to have a little bit of difficulty with the bump system, not getting used to it, and that I do feel like overall the game has aged significantly well, considering its age, considering how many other games have really, set the standard. Ys kind of maintains that still, and really stands out among a lot of the other RPGs that came out from that time. As in aging very well, a lot of JRPGs from that particular era did not. If you haven't played this and you're worried about starting with another Ys game, I do think you could kind of skip over this entry, as it's not necessarily something needed to understand the other Ys games. My research has led me into believing that most of these stories do kind of stand on their own, but they make references to each other here and there. Now, as I said, this is the first part of the Ys Chronicles review. The second part of Ys 2 will be coming once I finish that game up. And as well, this is a series we're going to continue to go through on the channel and do retrospective reviews of. Thank you again, guys, for tuning in to my retrospective review of Ys. If you are curious to check this out, as I said, it's available on the PC, it's available on the PSP, and if you can get your hands on a TurboGrafx, it's available on those as well. I have heard that the DS version is rather bland and boring and one to definitely avoid, but if that is your only means of playing it and you're curious, there is that version as well, but do note that that probably is not the best version to go with. You guys have been watching Gaming with Spoons. Be sure to hit subscribe there for me to keep up to date with all of my content. You can follow me on Facebook and Twitter. Links are going to be down below in that description box. Most importantly, stay happy, be happy, game happy. Spoons is checking out, and be sure to stay tuned for part 2 of our Ys Chronicles review.